We are very pleased to welcome you to this webinar to hear from the Secretary of Colombia's SDG Commission on the steps taken by Colombia to implement the new 2030 agenda and the SDGs. And we have several colleagues who are joining us via WebEx. But perhaps before we start, we can do a quick introduction in the room. Jeff, if you want to start.
Sure. Chair, we have my certificate for mine for this information. I actually look forward to seeing you talk about in April.
And then all of us that.
So for sharing the and I'm Nicolas Tremblay, also with the Division of Sustainable Development.
Isabella Cunha, with SDG.
My name is Felipe Castro. I'm the Technical Secretary of the High-Level Commission for the Implementation of the SDGs in Colombia.
Good afternoon. I'm Philip Schondorf, Director of the PAY, also from Bogotá, Colombia.
I'm Nikhil Sandhavatra, Chief of the Outreach and Communications Branch in the UN Division of Sustainable Development.
I'm sorry about that. International Stability Alliance. My name is for you. In addition, we have about 25 colleagues who have joined us via WebEx. Perhaps if I could invite Mr. Chandavakar to say a few opening words, and then we will turn the floor over to Mr. Castro. Nikhil?
Thank you very much, Lotta, and welcome to the delegation from Colombia, particularly Mr. Felipe Castro, of the SDG, the National SDG Commission. Just a few words by way of the HLPS process, of which this is very much a part. This is a very exciting year for the High-Level Political Forum, the first full-fledged, for those of you following it, the first full-fledged HLPS, where we will be taking the first set of national reviews. 22 countries, as you'll see on our mobile-friendly website, have confirmed so far. And between the 11th, particularly the first 5 days of the HLPS, we will be hearing from the countries. And as foreseen in the legislation, stakeholders will are expected to engage with this process. And now it is a country-led process, a state-led process, as the legislation points out. So each country will be deciding on its own modalities, and look forward to hearing from Colombia how it's being done in Colombia. But again, the countries, the governments are to be setting the tone, but there is an expectation that there will be strong engagement. So when the time comes, in the lead up, we would encourage you to reach out to your networks at the country level to have them reach out in turn to the national focal points of sustainable development in the government and follow the process there. This is all I wanted to say, that we look forward to, we encourage you to come to our website for the resources. There are 2 important resources there, which some of you may already have seen, a set of questions and answers on the national reviews, and of course the format provided, suggested format provided for the national reviews in the SDGs report on critical mass. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikhil. And now we would like to turn the floor over to Mr. Castro.
Okay, Nikki, thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure for the government of Colombia to be sharing with you
this afternoon the experience in tackling and implementing the SDG agenda. As I mentioned in my presentation, I'm the technical secretary of the high-level commission to the implementation of the SDGs. This commission was the first step to have an institutional arrangement put in place to carry on this agenda. Last February, we commemorate our first anniversary. We were one of the countries that had an early start in the implementation of the SDGs, and the first real step was creating this institutional arrangement. This commission is integrated by 7 members. The office of the president is sitting in this commission. The Ministry of Planning, in which I work, has the presidency of this commission, and also other 5 ministers with high-level political boards, and also the ones that manage the budget are the ones that are seated in this commission. These are the Ministry of Finance, the agency that carries out the statistics within the government, a department called Social Prosperity that is in charge of tackling poverty in our country, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and also we have an agency of international cooperation that is that is permanently sitting in this commission. So as you can see, we have this commission at the highest level, at the ministry level, and the objective of having this commission is to set up a strategy to implement the SDGs in Colombia, and also to move all the agencies across government to take actions to achieve this SDG agenda. This commission has so far seated together in 3 occasions. We've been working on setting up an arrangement within our government to implement this agenda. Most of the work has been focused on 3 aspects. The first one is having indicators to measure the SDGs. As I mentioned before, the agency of statistics is part of this commission, and they are also part of the interagency expert group that are discussing the indicators. So, in this sense, they take to this commission the discussions around these indicators and also the position that the country has had in these meetings. Also, by working on the indicators, we've been able to start thinking and having some baselines to measure at the national level the state of art of this data. As you know, measuring the SDGs is a big quest. Most of the countries won't have the data and the administrative registers to measure the SDGs. So we've been working all this year trying to tackle this issue, trying to see how we can get data not only from official statistics but also through data revolution, open access, big data, different sources to see how we can be able to measure this agenda. So this has been one of the main focus of the commission. The second one is regarding the subnational level. Our country had local elections last year. The new mayors and the new governors went into office January of this year, and we've been working with them so that they include the SDGs in their local development plans. So these 2 months have been very intensive in taking this agenda to the local level and helping them to see how this agenda can suit their necessities, can suit their political priorities, and that it could be included in these local development plans. That's the second aspect that we've been working on. And the third one is regarding the mobilization of resources to achieve the agenda. At this point, we are doing an exercise to try to map and to cost how many resources are needed to achieve this SDG agenda to 2030. This is not only government budget, but also it has to do with resources from the private sector, from the philanthropy sector. Also, how can the academy and the international aid can also give resources, not only financial, but also technical assistance, for example, to achieve this agenda. So, through this work, we want to have like a fiscal restriction and to see how our country, that is a middle high income country, can achieve the goals in 2030. It's very, very important, especially for countries similar to Colombia, to see that there are limits. We're not a rich country. We have to see how many resources we have, and after that we can set up how long should we try to get in this SDG agenda. So these are like the three things that we are working within the Commission. Also, another aspect that it's been working, that we are working in this Commission, is the engagement of other organizations different than government. At this point, we've been having several meetings with the civil society, with other organizations, especially with the UN aid system. Also, we've been trying to work with chambers of commerce, with unions of the private sector, to see their incentives, to see their interest in working within this agenda. Most of this work has been by demand, so these organizations know we exist, they come, and they tell us their interest in moving forward this agenda. And we're trying to set up specific projects, specific lines of action, so that we can move this SDG agenda forward. And also, all these strategies that we've been working this year has to end with a political document, a policy document that is issued by the presidency and by the Ministry Council, which includes the indicators and the targets through which our country is going to set up their efforts to get this agenda done in 2030. Also, it includes the budget and the amount of money that we will need to mobilize this agenda. And as I mentioned before, not only government budget, but also money from other non-governmental actors. This is a really, really brief recap of what we've been doing right now. Other achievements that we've managed to have in this short time has been to include the SDGs in our National Development Plan. This plan was issued in 2014, so it was issued one year before the SDGs were approved by the General Assembly. And in this sense, we were able to include 92 of the 169 targets. So it's very important to see how we are really, really committed at the highest political level to include in our national plan these SDGs. To give you an example, Colombia has a development plan has 3 pillars. The pillars are peace, equity, and education. These are strictly aligned with objectives 16, 10, and 4. And they put our focus on having great advances for the next 4 years in these 3 specific targets. If we manage to tackle these 3 targets, the country will be totally different, and we could move forward in pushing up this SDG agenda. Also, as some of you may know, Colombia is running at this point of time some peace negotiations with a group of rebels known as the FARC, and these peace agreements should be signed in the next weeks. So in this sense, we also have focused our peace process and our post-conflict strategy in 50 of the 169 SDGs. So by doing this, we've been able to adapt to our context, to our situation, to our political moment, this SDG agenda. And I think that's a very, very important message for the rest of the countries, because this SDG agenda is really, really broad, and it has to suit the reality and the moment of every country. And in this sense, in the case of Colombia, we align this SDG agenda with the achievement in peace. And another analysis that we've done regards who can contribute more or less to achieve the 169 targets. In this sense, 34 of these 169 targets cannot be achieved by countries themselves. They need a broader view. They need a regional view that crosses political borders. And in that sense, it's very, very important, especially in this context of the United Nations, to align forces, especially in these 34 targets that doesn't depend only on the will or political initiative of a single country. Also, in this exercise, we've analyzed the role of non-governmental organizations from the private sector, and we managed to see that 88 of the 169, almost a bit more than half of them, also are really, really focused on the contribution of the private sector. This is not a governmental agenda. If we as a government try to tackle the SDGs, we're going to bump into a wall, because half of those goals need to be worked with others. So that's why this commission is working, having this space to involve other actors, and we're conscious that we have limitations. There are some targets, for example, the one with objective 8, objective 9, objective 12. Those targets have a specific emphasis in the private sector and the role in the private sector regarding sustainable development. So in that sense, we have to work with a different strategy. We can't work as a government by ourselves. We need to involve other actors, and this is the only way in which we could tackle this agenda. Okay, so this is like the achievements or the balance that we've been working on in the last year. At this point, we are starting to draft this policy document that I told you before, of having these indicators and these targets to be approved by the presidency. In that sense, we are doing, or we're having an overview or a mapping of every single target, what is being done within the government and also in the private sector to achieve that target. We must not forget that the SDGs capture the objective, audience,
25 colleagues who are there is a master body which is raised not so many, but very much very present in the presentation and how the process already implemented. What is on the specific work that you are doing in the NGO? Pipeline evaluation that maybe the department was about the work of the so how have NGOs engaged in this process? What are the concerns and maybe implementing that mapping of private need on every of and the government and the colleagues with it. First, we have Ana Cristina Gonzalez from Jimena too. Can you hear me? Yes? Okay, hello, my name is Ana Cristina Gonzalez. Hello to everybody. I wasn't able to listen to the final part of Mr. Castro, but I think I heard here most of the presentation. So first of all, many thanks for the summary. I am from Colombia. I'm not living now in Colombia. I'm in fact in Brazil. But I was 2 days ago in Colombia invited by the... I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I was invited to have a kind of training with women's groups. So I just want to ask two things. The first one is, what about the lessons learned from the MDGs? 2 years ago, most of UN agencies produced a report about the gender gaps in the process of the implementation of MDGs. One of the biggest conclusions of that study, which I had the opportunity to be the main researcher, was that not only inequalities among regions and cities, but also inequalities among sexes were explaining our inability to meet most of the MDGs. So I think this is something very important because when you mentioned to us that you choose 3 main targets, you didn't mention target number 5. I'm sorry, target not. The objective number 5, which has to do with gender inequality. And my question is, how are you planning to reach or to fight inequalities without considering this specific goal? And the second one is about the civil society participation, because you did mention that you have been working with some organizations, and I would like to have more information about this, because the meeting I was telling you that happened 2 days ago had the participation of most of women's groups and organizations in Colombia, and they weren't aware about the work of this commission. So I think it would be important to strengthen
the participation of civil society partners, in the widest way. And I know that you have been working through some kind of organizations, and I would like to hear about your opinions on this point. And again, many thanks for your presentation and the efforts we are doing as a country.
Thank you. Maybe we can take one more question, and then we will take another round after the answer. So now we hear from Jimena Serpa.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Hello. Thank you. My name is Jimena Serpa. I am the Executive Director of RIADIS. RIADIS is the Latin American network of NGOs of persons with disabilities. We work in 48 organizations in 18 countries in Latin America. My question is how persons with disabilities engage in the planning and designing of national implementation plans. The reason for this question is that I would like to offer the expert knowledge of persons with disabilities in order to achieve that national implementation plans that you, Mr. Castro, are talking about, to be accessible and inclusive in order to leave no one behind. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your questions. I'm going to address first the ones regarding the NGOs and the civil society. And it's quite demanding and quite difficult to try to engage with a concept such as civil society, because it's difficult to get the correct representation of the civil society. I mean, every NGO has the same right to sit in this commission. Every NGO has the right to work towards this SDG agenda. However, in the operational aspect, it's quite difficult to guarantee this engagement and that everybody can work with the same intensity or with the same representation. What we're doing right now is to have this commission and especially our technical secretary as a focal point to talk with all the organizations that are interested in helping or in working in achieving this SDG agenda. So I think this is a major advance because in this sense you have a single point of entry to talk to the government that this point can direct to specific agencies, to specific projects, to specific areas, these efforts and articulate them with what the government is carrying out. So I think that the main focus of having this commission and this secretary is to align the different efforts. This doesn't mean that everything that is going to be done for the SDGs has to go this way. It can go another way, but we have this institutional arrangement so that we can articulate government actions with non-governmental organizations. In that sense, the example that you mentioned, Ana Cristina, regarding the women groups and the gender organizations, we as a commission were part of this meeting that you mentioned 2 days ago. Actually, I was there by presenting this strategy, and in this table for gender initiatives that is being supported by the Canada Embassy in Colombia, we invite them to engage in this strategy. And in this sense, it's very important to see that the gender approach of the SDGs is much broader than the one that was included in the Millennium Development Goals. If we compare the MDGs, the gender aspect was focused on Objective 3, and it was especially linked to education equality and also to health and sexual health regarding women issues. in the SDG agenda, it's much broader. It's not only objective 5, as you mentioned before, but also in the analysis that we've done, almost 1/5 of the whole targets are regarding gender. So there are much broader aspects that are not only the objective 5, but also it has to do with a decent job, it has to do with education, with health, with access to peace, to economic activities, obviously with poverty and the objective 10. So in this sense, it's much broader than the objective of the Millennium Development Goals. In that sense, the Colombian government has put forward this issue in the development plan that we issued last year. There are several articles and efforts that aim to increase the participation of the women in managerial positions. It's also included an obligation to assess the policy of gender in Colombia. With this development plan, I don't know if many of you know, but it's a law that is approved by the Congress. The government proposes this law, but it's at the end the Congress that the ones that approve this law, and we have to do that, or we have to do that. We don't have any chance of not doing it. So one of the commitments of the government is to assess the gender policy so far and see what we can do to achieve all the objectives that they have. So I mentioned a few examples of the pillars of the National Development Plan, but that doesn't mean that we've not been working in other aspects. That was just an example of the commitment of this plan. And finally, regarding the disabilities population and how we can have an accessible and inclusive agenda. As you know, this SDG agenda sets a challenge to don't leave anybody behind, and in that sense, everybody needs to be included. And a way to include everybody is to have adequate indicators with the correct disaggregations, so that we can see that the people that need to be addressed and the measures that we are aiming to achieve include those people. Because many times the averages hide the differences within the regions, within races, within gender. So it doesn't matter if we are talking specifically about disabilities or other type of population. It's very important that for each indicator we have correct disaggregations to measure what we need to measure. Because at the end, what is being measured is what is going to be done. So that's why we are already working on these indicators to have the correct measure for these SDGs, because if we don't have those measures, at the end of the day, probably we are not going to achieve this agenda. So I think that the main point that I want to raise regarding disabilities and other types of population is that we need representation of those population in the indicators that are or that are more close to their necessities. In that sense, we will guarantee to don't let them behind and to see that the government and the society works to address their necessities for the next years.
Thank you. Before we turn to our next set of questions, we understand that Ana Cristina Gonzalez would like to make a clarification. Ana?
Yes, thank you very much. I just want to say that Felipe, many thanks for your replies, but the meeting I'm talking about is a different one. Okay. The one I assisted was part of a UN Women initiative together with all women's groups in Colombia, so I think it would be very interesting if we can share information, because while we were there, maybe you were in the other one. And the second thing that I want to make clear is that, of course, I totally agree that gender equality is a cross-cutting dimension, but exactly for that is that I need when you mentioned that you have 3 of the SDGs And I think this is just an idea to work on, but I totally agree. I just wanted to clarify that, the first point. And thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you, Anna. Let's move on to the next set of questions. Let me just read out who are on my list. We have Valentina Nesta from DESA. We have Carolina Suarez from ASE Colombia. Jeff Huffine from Civicus. Arelis Norini from World Vision. And then we have George van der Heer. So Valentina, over to you. Valentina?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. This is a very interesting meeting, and for us sitting here in New York is such a great opportunity to learn from actions by the countries. Thank you very much for organizing and for the presenter. And I wanted to just ask a little bit more, Mr. Castro, if going back to the third area of focus that he mentioned on including and engaging non-state actors. We have been conducting some research in the past on Colombia, and we saw that, for instance, Colombia has the Data Protection Act number 1581 of 2012, and the Statutory Law 156 of 2011 on transparency and access to public information, which are very good points, enabling factors for engagement. We've been looking for national consultation and multi-stakeholder platforms, and I'm not sure whether the Congreso de Colombia is such institution, or whether you envisage more participation and engagement at subnational level. Would like to just have a little bit of clarification on the type of means and that are put in place other than having an entry point, as you said, in the Commission for dialogue with the government. Thank you.
Thank you. We now move on to Carolina Suarez from ASE Colombia. Carolina?
Hello. Can you hear me right now?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you, Felipe. It's a pleasure to listen to you from New York. We are here in Colombia. And for us, it's really important to work with the government. We are the Association of Corporate and Family Foundations here in Colombia, and we are working as a local partner of the SDG Philanthropy platform. So I just want to ask Felipe, from the government point of view, what are the main challenges for Colombia being one of the pilot countries of the SDG Philanthropy platform?
Thank you. Then we take a few questions from the room. Jeff?
Thank you very much. Thank you for this very impressive briefing. As someone from the United States, I think there's much to be learned by your example, the engagement of the government, but also the engagement of the citizens in this agenda. It's quite impressive already. Earlier this week, I was at an expert group meeting sitting next to a U.S. delegate from the U.S. mission, and as an American, I can say I was, embarrassed, quite frankly, that the United States hasn't even begun consultations with its own citizens yet. There's been a few meager attempts at interagency meetings, but so I just want to congratulate not only the government of Colombia, but the citizens of Colombia for taking this agenda quite seriously. And along those lines, I just want to ask about your development of modalities for an accountability framework within the country at all levels. So that's national, subnational, local, and particularly those modalities that will ensure the participation of citizen engagement, including those in extreme poverty, which is often the hardest parts of the population to reach, to give agency. And you did touch upon and other NGOs, representatives from Colombia mentioned the Parliament, and if you could give us a little bit more insight into the role of Parliament in terms of oversight, as well as in the monitoring of partnerships in the development of multi-stakeholder partnerships with the office.
Thank you, Jeff. Let's take one more question now from Adelis Delorini.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Felipe Castro, for this good presentation that you've made. I think we've been hearing a lot of comments and questions from the Latin American Crown and the Colombian Constitution. So it's good to come to New York and be in the family. Being out of the family. Two questions and maybe one comment. One is I was very interested to hear about the process that you are undergoing adapting the SDG indicator to the SDG. So if you could share a little bit of what are the challenges on that, and how do you find how you found that exercise? That would be really interesting, important for the organizations like Revolution that we been working a lot with some of those indicators that they relate to children. The second one is you mentioned that you're drafting some policy document. I would gather that refers to the fact that you are adapting policies and contextualizing into those policies. So I was really interested to hear a little bit more on if you can give one or two examples of policies that you need to adapt because of the SDGs. And the third is perhaps a comment that I would like to make. It's very impressive, how Colombia, for over a year, is already geared up to implementing the SDGs. And of course, here in New York, in the UN context, everybody's looking Colombia because of the leadership role that you play on the development of the SDGs and everything, and also that you have a fantastic ambassador here presenting the issues of her country quite well. So from that perspective, I am hoping, and hoping that when we share your experience of how you are implementing, then you can also show what a good harnessing of civil society involvement is in this process, because I think that's quite few countries who have not been as active in relation to civil society as others. So it would be good to kind of like model how that is looking like, or how that participation of civil society, including children, is taking place. So if that can also elaborate a little bit more on that. I mean, maybe not now, but ongoing as you present your experience in different forums, if you can elaborate that a little bit more, so that you can be a good reference and model that.
Thank you. Okay, let's take one more question, and if you can speak up, please. This is Orsonia Bartas, here in the room.
Thank you very much. I also would like to express how thankful we are for this very good initiative and for this great presentation and for the openness of your country, because this is wonderful what you are doing right now. And I have my member organization, who is on the ground in Colombia, already asked questions in relation to persons with disabilities, but I have more like a practical question. How can they engage with you in practical terms? How can they participate at the meetings? Because we are already talking with bringing disabled persons organizations together, not only in the region, but also on the ground. We are providing them with information, material on the SDGs, so they are very knowledgeable what are the SDGs, and they have the focal point. We're ready to talk to the government and work with you in this process to develop the national plan, but what is the concrete entry point for them to work with you together? And thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, let me try to answer all the questions that you put on the table. few of the questions were related with the participation at the national, the local level, at non-governmental organizations, participation of citizens. And as I mentioned before, this is a quite difficult task because it's really difficult to try to put through an institutional arrangement a mechanism that is able to capture the participation of the different organizations that are interested in this SDG agenda. So in this sense, within the government, we've set like three main actions to promote and facilitate this participation. The one I mentioned, the one that I mentioned before, is to have like a focal point, a single entry, so that through this commission and through this secretary, we can articulate the initiatives that the non-governmental sector are interested on with the work within the government. So I think this is very important because it's not easy to work with government. We know that we also have different silos within government. So by having this single entry point, I think it's a big step forward to articulate the work that is being done away from our government and within government. The second aspect is that in this policy document and in the analysis that we've been doing, we see a role of the non-governmental organization. So in that sense, we don't want these NGOs to compete with government programs. What we want to do is to complement the initiatives that we are running right now and to see where we can work together. I'll give you an example. One of the pillars of the National Development Plan, as I mentioned before, is education of quality for all our citizens. And in that sense, we see the private sector that they can contribute to this strategy by giving funds to a fund that was constructed to the infrastructure of schools. So in that sense, a private entity can put their money in this fund and they can fund, I don't know, 2, 3 schools. They can have the name of the school regarding maybe their organizations. But at the end, we see that the private sector can move forward this strategy by putting their money in this fund. We don't see convenient they pay teachers or they give food and lunch to kids when they go to school, because maybe that duplicates what we have to do by law. But the arrangement that we have at this point is that we created this fund, and that fund can capture private resources. So from the government, we just present this alternative, and we say, we think that this is the correct way that you can contribute to the strategy that we're putting in place right now. But it's an option. You as a private, you can put a school, you can attend it by free. It's always an option. It's not binding, but it's an option that we are putting on the table so that the private sector can decide. In that sense, this is just an example, but what we're trying to do with every goal and with every sector is to put on the table a strategy to involve and to engage philanthropy and the private sector. This is work in progress. We, as I mentioned before, this is just an example, but we hope that at the end of the year, or maybe at the beginning of next year, there's going to be an official position on how we can contribute, or how from the government we see that the private sector and the NGOs can contribute to achieve this SDG agenda. But as I mentioned before, it's not binding. The idea is just to give some signs. And the third action that we want to take is to create incentives and give visibility of the work by non-governmental actors. It's very, very important that everybody sees how they contribute to the SDGs, because especially for the private sector, Maybe we have something like a quality seal in which we see that enterprise A is a sustainable development focused enterprise while enterprise B is not, and they compete and they produce the same things. In that sense, it's important to move on this visibility to show from the government with a serious analysis and a serious argument of this strategy that we can provide this kind of quality seal so as an incentive for especially for private sectors to move forward in this way. In that sense, this is also a work in progress. It's just an idea that we have, but I think that the visibility of the work, not only within government but outside of government, is very, very important. Because at the end of the day, donors and NGOs and organizations also want to engage with the agenda, but they also want to how do you say, to show out and to see that they are really, really contributing to this agenda. So those are the three main topics or the three main areas in which we are working right now, and that we hope to help participation to contribute to this agenda. Somebody mentioned the challenge in the transition from the MDGs to the SDGs. In this sense, it's very important to compare both agendas. As you know, the MDGs were focused on people. The SDGs are more broad. They include the planet, the partnerships, the prosperity, justice. So it's like new spheres of development, and they need a different approach. The MDGs were more social. The SDGs are also economic and environmental. So in that sense, they require a more transactional or transversal work, and it can't be seen only as specific actions in specific sectors. However, as I mentioned before, the MDGs are not finished. The SDGs capture these MDGs, and in the analysis that we've done, we see that at least 49 of the SDGs targets are related with the MDGs. So in that sense, it's a major challenge, because that doesn't mean that the work has been done with the MDGs. We have to finish the work that we didn't manage to tackle in the MDG agenda, and we also need to move further and perform other tasks. In that sense, for example, in Colombia, teen pregnancy and also gender issues are a pending topic. We need further efforts. We need to tackle them, and they must be a priority in the SDG agenda. I think that the first step is to finish up the work that you weren't able to finish in the MDGs agenda, and also to move forward in the other topics. So it's very, very important that every country has a balance of the MDGs. Most of the statistics have a lag of maybe 1 year or maybe more, but at this point of time, we need to look back. We need to see what were our targets that we failed to meet, and we need to continue working for these targets. It's very important not to just move along and forget that we have this MDG agenda. And finally, you asked Orsolia not Orsolia, but I forgot your name, for a specific example of how in Colombia we are tackling these new issues. The SDG agenda, as I mentioned before, is not only social, but it also has economic and environmental issues. In that sense, we are putting in place a strategy that is called Green Growth Strategy. Most or several advanced countries already have been thinking on this agenda. For example, Finland, they have a commission for sustainable development like 15 years ago. But especially in countries, in medium countries and in low-income countries, this is a new topic. We are worried of just creating some some better life, to create economic growth, that we haven't been thinking on how we create that economic growth, if it's sustainable, if it's responsible, if it provides a proper job or decent job to people. Those type of things are things new for us. So as you mentioned before, the U.S. maybe many of the topics are already being checked, but others that for being a developed country are going to be working on them for the first time. In our case, as middle-income countries or poor countries, it's the same. Because sustainable development doesn't mean that you only have to grow by growing, but also you have to grow in a responsible way. So in that sense, we created, we call it in Colombia a mission, like Mission Impossible, but it's an arrangement in which we focus on one topic. We contract experts, we bring also international experts to see how we can tackle the issue. So this year, this mission for green growth is starting. We have a fund that is called Colombia Sostenible. It's also linked with the peace process and the green growth, and we are going to study the topic as a country for the next 1.5 years, and after that we are going to come out with policies, laws, new institutions to advance in this way. So this is an example of how countries should use a mechanism to start thinking on new topics, because all of the countries, developed and underdeveloped countries, have new topics in this agenda. There are new things that we've never thought about it before. So in that sense, we need to start thinking on it. We need to do studies. We need to collect data. We need to do consultations. We have to do a lot of things to see how we manage to tackle this issue. So this example of the Green Growth Mission is an example, I hope, to be really practical, to answer how our country is thinking in moving forward this SDG agenda. I don't know if I was able to answer all the questions, or
I heard one on the accountability framework.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. Allowing myself to.
Yeah, sorry. The accountability of the SDG agenda. Okay. The mean to accountability, I think, should be the indicators. That's like the basics. We need to have an open system that everybody could access and could see how every country is achieving this SDG agenda. That wasn't the case for the MDG, at least in our country. We produced like annual reports, but there wasn't like a system in which you could turn on and log through the internet and see how the progress is being done. So in that sense, this year, and I forgot to mention that, we're working on having this website, to put it not only in a governmental page, but also in an open page, in which we could put in a single page these indicators, these targets, and that we can be held accountable, not government alone, but society as a whole, of achieving or not achieving the SDGs. Also, in that sense, the accountability, it's very important to link it not only with a responsibility of the government, but also of the society as a whole. As I mentioned before, all of us are working to achieve this agenda, but if we are not able to achieve it, or we struggle on the way, that doesn't mean that the government is going to be exclusively responsible for not achieving it. Obviously, we have the main responsibility, which is part of our mission, but I think it's very important to see this accountability as a means to see the progress that we are achieving, but also to see that it's not only the government, the one that is responsible or the one that has to achieve this agenda. This is much broader from the government. As I mentioned before, 34 targets have to do with countries working together. If a government struggles in working with their neighbors, that doesn't mean that the government is the only responsible. So in that sense, it's very important to have this public space to show the progress of the country, but also to distribute responsibilities in moving forward this agenda. You also mentioned something regarding the Congress. The participation of the citizen is also something difficult to engage the citizen, particularly in these policy actions, because you don't have like a single representation of the citizenship. So in that sense, accountability has to be really broad, has to be open. This data has to be accountable for everyone, not only for the Agency of Statistics, but all the organizations have to be able to revise the data, to get the data, and to see how we are achieving progress. In that sense, we have like a pending issue there, and it's that Congress is not really involved in this SDG agenda, at least in Colombia. At this point of time, we are arranging things within government, and we're not given that step to include this in the Congress, but probably further on we should include them because they are a key actor in the democracy and they have to be included also in this SDG agenda.
I think we have one more question from Nicholas, and we don't see any other questions from the WebEx. So perhaps one last. And Anneli? Yeah.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm going to tease a little bit more out of you on the accountability because I think it's fundamental and very interesting. One of the things that I've noted generally is that there is effort and there is a real awareness of how challenging measurement of sustainable development goals is. So while we address this challenge, we realize also that this is a measurement at real sort of outcome and impact level. This is our real objective. We want a prosperous society. But the accountability chain is not only at that last level of the impact and the outcome that we desire, it's also in the more trivial and mundane aspects of, okay, we want an educated population, which means that maybe the Ministry of Education has to recruit 2,000 more teachers for the next school year. Now that is trivial. That's not the end achievement. It's not recruiting teachers. That's the objective. But in order for us to learn, in order for us to have a complete accountability framework from the top but also all the way to the bottom, we need to be able to create this linkage between the more trivial, mundane delivery output level information and the outcome that we're trying to achieve. And I've been sort of finding in the different places that I've visited that this is the biggest challenge, because both of those accountability levels are seen as important. And what I'm seeing as the major task is to look at them both together in a process where we're really learning and we're really answering the question, well, okay, we've recruited 2,000 teachers, we've had that impact, good, bad, better than planned, insufficient. How do we actually learn from this to know that maybe next time we don't need to hire 2,000 teachers, maybe we just need 500 teaching advisors? I don't know. And this thing is, I'm just wondering how you're structuring it and what kind of evaluation, review, learning process is there. I'm sorry, the question was too long.
Nice, okay.
Thank you, Nicolas. And one last question from Anneli, and then we're going to be wrapping up after that.
Just a comment, Felipe, that regarding civil society and the challenge of who to incorporate and so on. I just want to say that with children, we have a mission in Colombia because most of the organizations are doing that in the Movimiento Infantil. So doing that Movimiento Infantil, and they have the full children constituency right there. And Sofia from the International Provision Mundial can help with the connection there.
Thank you. Okay. Accountability requires a really high political commitment. In that sense, that political commitment regarding the SDGs has to do with doing things in a different way. I mean, business as usual is not an option, and we in government need to work in a different way. If we keep on doing things as we've been doing them, it's probably that we're not going to be able to achieve this SDG agenda. So in that sense, that's what we're trying to do with this mapping and this prioritization, to show how at the operational level, at the delivery level, we are going to try to do things differently. Obviously, this has to carry out a process. It couldn't be instantly, but it's very, very important to show shift in how government works and how we can move further on to achieve this SDG agenda. However, that depends on the political commitment. Probably that will work better in some sectors, in others not that good, but it's important to show in how government is working the actions that are being taken to move forward this SDG agenda. How to put that in practical terms, I think one of the ways is evaluation. I didn't mention that I have another job besides being the technical secretary. I'm also a director of monitoring and evaluation of the Ministry of Planning. And evaluation is a means to assess this type of things. And the example that I mentioned before regarding the gender policy, it's a way to evaluate not a single program, not a single policy, but a cross-sectional issue such as gender. So in that sense, I think that evaluation needs to evolve. Evaluation has a new umbrella called the SDGs, and we should try to move further and have evaluation skills of how government is addressing SDGs. Not only evaluating specific programs that are being implemented in different sectors. So I think that those two things, political commitment to change how things are being done, and an evaluation of how the government is achieving the SDG agenda, are the means to have an accountability more in practical terms, and not only accountability showing results and actions to achieve the SDGs. I don't know if that answers your question.
Thank you so much, colleagues, and thank you to Mr. Castro. Perhaps, Nikhil, any concluding remarks?
Yes, just a few, to say what a privilege this was, because we have been debating a lot of these issues at the global level, and to have the reality check of contact at the national level from a person who's really at the center of this process. I just wanted to, on a personal note, I served in Colombia with UNDP. I was deputy representative in Colombia many years ago in the Gaviria government. And one of the things that's always struck me about Colombia. And what always struck me about Colombia is how it was able to take international decisions and nationalize them in record time. Whether it was the first Rio conference, and I see that this is nothing has changed in that sense. Colombia continues to do that. So. We look forward to working with you, and for all of us here, this is very much a preview of what's going to come in the national reviews. And for us, you helped us, Felipe, to get a head start on the process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nikki, for the invitation. It's also a pleasure for the government to share our experiences, and also through your questions, you've also made us think on some topics that maybe are not at the front of our agenda. So it's very, very useful, this meeting, also for the process that we are carrying out in Colombia. So thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you, colleagues, and have a great rest of the day. Good weekend wherever you are, and we hope to be organizing more webinars with you. We apologize to colleagues who have experienced some spotty Wi-Fi at times, but we will have a recording of this available. And thank you again. Bye-bye.